Hello.
Yeah, well, yes. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
No, I'm all right. I'm all right.
Yeah, yeah.
Was having my
Um, Sorry?
I was having my coffee and
Oh,
trying not
nice.
to make noise as I'm drinking my coffee.
Nice. I forgot to make my own cup. So you're able to sleep after drinking coffee at night?
It's decaf. It's decaf.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, okay, all right.
I have that slight problem too.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Okay. No, that's really great. I mean, I mean, it's not decaf, but I drink it and I sleep like a baby still. But
Hey.
anyway, with, without much further ado, I wanted to tell you something just as we start our conversation. You're not the only one who's a part of my nerves now yes, before it's a live stream. So you're in
That's good to know.
quite good. Yeah. Just one thing before Stala, ne?
Mm.
I think you sent abantu abanye a wrong link. Balana TV studio. There's a second link. I think
Oh, okay.
yeah,
All right. So give me a
house.
moment. Let
Otherwise, people are
me.
not convey properly.
I see. Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Wait. You said to enter the studio. You sent me one that to say StreamYard.com
Yes.
Facebook.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let
That's the
me.
one we choose. Yeah.
All right. Sorry. You see, there's going to be a story behind this. Actually, you know, can you be nailed by tech? This is quite scary.
I Itek Ainam niggas.
Thank you, Kada. I
Yeah.
agree. Oh Lord, hey,
Yeah. No, it's cool. We can, or you let me know once you're done. Ne?
yeah. Um, all right. So I think now we are good to go. Yeah, I see when somebody just said they're within. So
Oh, nice.
all right, cool.
Thank you. Thanks, Nosipho, for accepting my invitation. I think it's been a long time coming, and I'm saying it knowing that this is a fairly new live stream. Um, but I think there's a lot of with time and as time go on that we will do for the benefit of the movement or the people. I would like to start by reading your bio. I think I want people to know. So ngiyaflex khona manje ukuthi me tonight. I mean, not just good, but great company, guys. So let me just hear me out. Nosipho started her career with Hewlett Packard, South Africa, where she fulfilled various roles, including enterprise and services businesses, and leading the category and marketing business for the printing business. She then went on to join Microsoft, where she fulfilled various roles in the transactional volume business. She then went on to IBM as technical and support services business, and currently she is sales director at Oracle University Africa. She holds a Bachelor of Commerce degree from the University of the Witwatersrand and a Management Advancement Program certificate from Wits Business School. She has completed various other management or executive programs and is an avid cyclist and sits in the Board of Trustees at Legacy Ride4Hope. There's a lot more that we will touch on, I think, as we have our conversation this evening. That's you, I think, in a nutshell, but there's a lot more than this. Can you introduce yourself to our audience and our guests, our friends, and everyone that's watching us tonight?
Thanks, Mzu. Thanks for the opportunity. So I think you're right. It's been a long time coming. We've been talking BrownSense for quite a while, and I've been watching what you've been doing with your team. And I'm glad to be here, number one. And I think let this be a taste of things to come in terms of
Mm.
doing better with the BrownSense movement. So introducing myself, where do I start? Yeah, I'll start with the stuff that really matters. I'm a daughter, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a friend, I'm a sister. So I'm these many things. And then on the side, I dabble with some tech stuff or some career stuff. And and then and then I think somewhere along the line, just to keep sane, keep the heartbeat going, we get onto the bike, I think to take in the fresh air, see some scenery. But in a nutshell, that's me.
That's Nosipho. And
In
where,
a few words, in a few.
in a few words. So just tell us maybe by way of background. I always like to visualize because also it's part of who you are right now. Your background, where you grew up. You've already given us an idea in terms of your family background, but ukhulele kweliphi kasi or kweliphi suburb?
No. I'm in my mid-40s, so that's impossible. So very humble beginnings. Born in the 70s in Durban, humble KZN. And stayed in a place called Inanda. So Inanda comes up in the news for interesting stuff, but I think most who probably also know of Inanda will know of Inanda Seminary and Oshange. And that's my humble beginning, or humble, where I come from, home. Raised by a village, and the village I'll refer to is ugogo nomkhulu, umalume, and aunts. Mom was studying in Ghana. Mom went to study medicine. So mom was away for a good 9 years or so odd, because mom was studying. And I guess, the story there is, and the narrative is also a woman needing to do something different to better their life, and venturing as far afield as Ghana, to enable and realize that dream. Grew up with my cousin, and I suppose it's when you are, your grown-up self, you kind of reflect on my journey, where I'm from, and you realize, hey, we've come a long way, and appreciate also where you come from, because it's been part of molding the person that is here today. And then I think, beyond that, there's a school. School took me as far afield as a place called Lusigisigi. Lusigisigi in Transkei. I spent about a good 2-3 years in Lusigisigi, and what was then, I think, the city sub A and sub B.
For us millennials, can you please tell us what's that in today's terms?
So sub A and sub B in today's terms is grade 1 and grade 2. So one is old, and went somewhere, found one's roots back towards KZN. Did finish off my high school in KZN, started off at Varsity College, then found myself at Wits University doing my BCom around 95, 96, somewhere there. And I guess that the city of gold, the bug has bitten, because many years later, I think 25 plus years later, I'm still in the city of gold. And wow, what a journey, what a journey.
Yes. Quite an interesting journey, and it sounds like it's quite that you've had in terms of exposure. You've been to the. I love all the time when people still say it's Transkei. I'm like,
Bye. I said that.
It
was the Transkei. It wasn't Eastern Cape back then. It was the Transkei.
Yeah, for sure. But it's the exposure. So just what you've had that at a very young age. It sounds like when where I grew up, for instance, the different parts of Soweto, and I think a lot of people abakhulele emalokishini, not only Soweto, will relate to this. Ukuthi these types of classifications, kuthiwa kune-Zulu section, there's a Sotho section, and those types of classifications, and not till we know when we are going that side of the township, we are going to this, and these are the people that we are going to encounter when we get there. And what that does, I think, is deprive at an early age, Leo, that in immersion of just getting to know one another at a very young age.
Yeah.
Wow.
I agree. Look, and Inanda is not what I would call a township. The nearest township to Inanda is Guamashu. It's what I call, what I think it was classified as peri-urban.
Yes.
But also growing up in KZN, I guess you didn't have, as you say, those divides of Xhosa section, Zulu section, Tsonga section. No, nonke namaZulu at the end of the day. You are one thing. And I think it's when I was now avid and I was hearing this thing of Zulu section. I'm like,
that's that.
The stuff is rough.
Yeah.
It gives you a different appreciation of, I suppose, part of what you'd say is a challenge of, as you say, that just this immersion and appreciation of the diversity and who we are as people.
Yeah, that is so true. That is so true. So I think I would like for you to tell us about, in your earlier days, school days and all that. What would you point out as maybe events, activities, individuals maybe that played a role in directing you down the path that you've gone, landing into the tech space? And
what a question. So I guess home, I come from a family of, there are two doctors. My mom is a doctor, my grandfather was a doctor, my uncle was a nurse, and then I had this uncle who was Malume Boyce. He was engineering personified himself, if I may say so, although he didn't study engineering. I mean, the scientific brain, the understanding, the wanting to deep dive, tear apart things, put them together, get them to function through a different short circuit, a different circuit instead of the one that was initially intended. And I think those are things that somewhere like, what, he's just taken apart the iron. Why has he taken it apart? But I think that connection with the tech, to be very honest with you, probably came in much later. But I do recall once going to University of Natal, and we went into a room and there were cadavers. And just the mere thought of walking in, and I was like, oops, I knew I didn't have roots in the medical field. I think I thought maybe dentistry, maybe optometry. But then it just kept on coming back to this thing of, can I deal with issues of blood, etc., etc. So that was me, and kind of what was the expectation that I'd follow into the medical field. I was fortunate enough to have gone to a school called Utongati. Utongati was part of a group, was part of a school within the NEST group, New Era Schools Trust.
Okay.
And Putting, I think, if you're a Joburger, Putting, which is now Summit College, which is out near River Sands. And it had a similar school in KZN, which was called Utongati. I guess the history of Utongati was, in the era it opened as a school, and as a group it opened up as multiracial. And I was fortunate to have spent some years at Utongati. And we used to have what was called Project Fortnight every year. It was 2 weeks out of formal school, and various different, various things were put on offer. I remember the one year I did hiking, and I remember thinking, hey, this life is too hard. Hiking is not for me, because we were hiking in the Drakensberg for 7 days with tents and stuff. That was just like, it's too much. And the one year I chose marketing. And marketing just opened one's eyes into the world of business, the subtle play of words, pictures, and influencing people on brands, driving choice of things that they buy, things that sometimes you didn't know that you want. You find yourself wanting it. And it's then I knew business was where I was going to be. And what I was going to do, I think that one was like, Sabona Pambi. And I suppose also there was some level of disappointment at home that you're not venturing into medicine. But I come from a home where I also have an aunt who's in the environmental space, and I have an aunt who's a librarian. So the world is kind of like the pearls you oyster. Well, no, let me not use that. You could do what you really wanted to do, trial, venture. And there was that openness at home, and you could have these conversations. And as guys, I'm going to do a BCom. I don't know what, but I figure I'm going to do a BCom. I actually can't remember what was the real driver for me to do IS, information systems, in my first year. But come Varsity College, it was a class of about 20 of us, and there were only 2 women, and I was the only black woman. And it was the most fascinating thing because the content at the time was, they were talking ones and zeros. Sure. And some of the guys, the language and the programming was like this. They were just in tune with the stuff. Sure. Where in that programming, you were kind of coming at it from, okay, the paper says this, the book says this, but reality, what does it say? But these guys knew the ins and out of a computer. And I remember thinking, maybe this is not really the thing for you. But then I guess there's a subtle thing that's playing at the back of your head that says, well, you're here, you're going to have to do it, and you're going to have to survive. Lava who think you're not going to do it, I think you need to show them a thing or two. And a few years later, you find yourself, you've now majored in infosystems. And I guess the infosystems at Wits was probably more kind of a business analyst kind of curriculum rather than really leading you into hardcore technical stuff. So at that stage as well, you're still thinking, oh, okay, this is interesting stuff coming up. I had a scholarship from Unilever. So my vacation work while studying was spent at Unilever. But funny enough, I was in the accounts department because I was actually supposed to come out as one of those to go into their finance field.
Sure.
And that didn't quite materialize the way it was supposed to because HP came along, and I thought, well, we can always go back to the finance world. Let's actually go and see what this tech thing is about. And that's how I ended up at HP. And maybe I shall pause there and then just let you take it in, or maybe the next, where to from there. But that's why I entered. For me, tech was, I had this job offer from Unilever, and I had the offer from HP, and I was like, finance, IT, let's go and try this thing that's unknown. And if it really doesn't work out, then at least I've got a fallback because I've got my accounting major. I can nurture that if I really find that this tech thing, IT thing is just horrendous. And that's how I ended up in IT.
Wow. So you had that moment, Matrix, which is it the blue pill or the red pill moment? Which
Yes, I did. And it was a difficult one because, at home, the safety net was Unilever. Unilever is a company that we grew up with, at least even in the household, Unilever brothers, you're using the products at home. And now when are you deemed as, how dare you turn your back on Unilever when you just educated with the junior scholarship? When Amanje Usuti, thanks guys, goodbye. So yeah, there was a bit of tension, especially because now this HP is like, hey, Hewlett, what?
Wow. Well, I would say it looks like you made the right decision. tell me something now. Now, one of the things that we tend to hear, or the narrative, that as far as tech and women, especially Black women, are concerned, is that either there are no opportunities for them, or there's no deliberate intent or action towards creating those opportunities for them to in order for them to be able to get into those spaces.
Mm-hmm.
From your experience and from what you see, is it that, as in, truly no one is interested at all in giving women, specifically Black women, those spaces? Firstly, or secondly, is it they are just not interested, but the opportunities are there, and there is a deliberate or whatever action to say, guys, here are the opportunities. This is what you can do. This is what you need to study, and so forth.
Okay. Great question. So I'll tackle it in two parts because I think being in tech, I see my role a little bit different in tech, in the tech space. So maybe let me just take it back a few moments, about 22 minutes ago when we started. Sent me two links and I sent out the wrong link to people and I'm like, hey, okay, and there we go. So it's demystifying this.
Someone said even the best of us, let me show you, that even the best of us can be Mabena's at times.
Yeah, no, that is true. Some of us can be Mabena's at time. And so what I want to demystify there is that being in tech means that I can maneuver a device and code and etc. etc. Absolutely not. I'm really that lady in tech who, I still call a friend and I'm like, hello, I need help. Yeah, how do I do this? Actually, you say that I joined one organization and the organization notes. And I remember phoning a friend and saying, I'm 30 days into this job. I think I'm going to resign because this notes and Outlook are not the same. But anyway, a story for another day. So coming back to your question, I think in tech, opportunities that exist there are opportunities that are for the non-techie, and I'm that non-techie. But I exist in a technical world or in an IT or ICT field. And then there are tech roles. So maybe let me touch a bit on kind of the space I find myself in. And yes, I did start off in a part tech environment, in a pre-sales environment, but I didn't nurture that beyond perhaps, I ventured into sales and I went into business management and I led segments. But the key message and the key driver that we were taking to customers was you can enable your business with tech. So there are those roles, and those roles exist in your marketing space. You can support the tech world from an HR perspective and operations perspective as well. So I don't think that opportunities are limited if you are not a techie. You can run business, you can market business. The sky's the limit in terms of what you can do if you're a non-techie. And I guess I'm a non-techie. And then we have tech roles. And I think this is the challenge that we do have in the sector and in the space, in that we need to nurture the gender gap, number one, but also the race gap in terms of seeing more young girls enter the space, or more women as well enter this tech space. But what does entering the tech space mean? It starts with, we need to nurture your mathematics and your science and your engineering subjects from the time that girl child, boy child is entering school, seeing it through to the end of their high school career as they enter and transition into the tertiary space. And then we enable with programs that allow them to enter the employment field. But I'm also one who says, with the world, how it's pivoting, we should also be teaching our kids to be entrepreneurs, and they can be entrepreneurs with tech. And I think that's what we're seeing is you can code from your room, and you can make a meaningful and decent income and run your business perhaps from your bedroom. And those are some of the lessons I kind of leave with my kids.
Sure.
Think of the world in many different ways, in ways that we were not taught. But I think just bringing it back once more is in the tech space, we need to nurture your science, engineering, and mathematics as subject choices. And we need to take away this fear factor of those are hard subjects, they cannot be done. And then we need to see more women come in and do your science degrees, your information systems, and your IT type fields. And then we need to have the programs which are very intentional in terms of the intake of women and Black women, and also what are the paces we are putting people through. And those are your internship programs now, which will talk to you identify, a number, but what is that meaningful kind of development on the program? Does it entail, being put on meaningful projects, contributing to that project and the development, and then also I think just continuing the cycle of engaging in a dialogue, but in also saying that it is lonely, and I think in the loneliness we need to ensure that we empower people with mentorship, with coaching opportunities, so that we take away that sense of it's a scary world. You walk into a room and it's just men, and and this is part of, I think, one's reality. One of the businesses I led, I just knew it. Well, I actually didn't know it, but I remember walking into one of the retail meetings and thinking, right. Firstly, there's no person of color, and there's no woman of color, and we were such a long way away from that. And it's only, I'd say, in the recent past, you're kind of seeing some of that transformation shape itself, but you still have this gap because it's either way too entry level and then also way too senior. So there's kind of nothing here in the gap that shapes and molds this picture of there's an option, there's a possibility for me as well to grow and see myself rise up within the ranks.
Wow. Well, you've really touched on something very key in your earlier part of answering the question, which was basically unpacking the tech space. Angithi, most of us think, and Hollywood and the media play a big role in this. Geeky kids who can code, sit in coffee shops, abanye ngama laptop busy like typing.
Yes.
And that's kind of how we've gotten to see it as. You've made me think of something else now. So there's the part here when you talk about the intake, of Black women, or creating those opportunities where they can come in, whether they come in as interns and whatever other roles. Now, inside the organization, and I'm going to frame the question this way, maybe based on my not experience per se, but things that I've observed in my area, which is law. Where you find yourself as a lawyer or a young Black lawyer in this big law firm, ungene because of the numbers, right? They have to do to meet this quota or the numbers. But now that you're in this machine, you're not given quality work that is going to help you grow as a professional. Is this something that you've seen in the tech space where it's like, okay, Ozani, everyone is now here. We've ticked all the boxes. Now that we are here, maybe you either do some mundane thing that's going to kill your brain cells and not grow you and nurture you and give you more opportunities. Is that something that you would say is there or is in place, or that you've seen in your journey within the space?
So that was me. I started my roots. I remember graduate program, and at some point I was going through manuals on which screwdriver to use to change a disk drive.
Yeah.
I did these courses for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, man. I didn't go to Wits to do this anyway. This is not what I want to do. Had a meeting with HR. I'm like, come, let's go and sit down and have coffee. And the things you do when you're young, actually, some days I now sit and I reflect on this action and I'm like, my 22-year-old self was, rather, I don't know whether to say stupid, brave, but anyway, the point was, I then said, guys, really great that you've offered me this opportunity. This is not what was my intended design. I'm not going to wear hard hats and hard shoes. But keep the pay. I'll stay at home. When you've now decided what the program really must mean, call me and I'll be back. And look, Mzu, I think it could have been said differently. I probably didn't know better at the time. We just went with the flow.
Yeah.
And it didn't backfire. I think that's probably the message for me. It didn't backfire at the time. And maybe I had a mature set of people I was dealing with who then quickly said, no, that's not what we want.
Yeah.
And they thought about it differently. And voila, I found myself in something where was more meaningful in that you weren't doing the filing. And as you say, that mundane task where you think, I have to be at the office and by 10 o'clock, my brain will be fried. Not fried because you are thinking, but because you're just not stimulated.
Sure.
So I think I think your question where you're angling it is, in corporate, is this maybe part of the challenge? I do think yes, but I think where some of us play a role is we've been there before. It's for us now in leadership roles to make sure that we don't take another child through that kind of experience where they have to call somebody into a room and say, keep the pay, I'm going home, I'll come back when you're ready for me, or I'll find my feet elsewhere. Because I think that's also some of the frustration we're seeing in young people we are bringing into organizations, and that we have these great programs, they really speak volumes, but when it comes down to the meat and the content of what people are doing, it's lacking. And we lose people through a system, and we lose really, really great minds and great talent because just haven't tapped into that young mind, whilst does not have the work experience, how they think, how they problem solve, the perspective they bring is a much needed perspective, because sometimes I think we get lost in, we've been doing it for like this for 10 years and that's the only way and the only narrative that we know, that we're not prepared to be challenged and have our status quo challenged. So I think it is important for us as custodians and as leaders, having been down this path, to speak up, to ensure that we frame and we shape these intern programs to be meaningful. Make sure that when we talk about skills transfer and on-the-job training, that you assign a mentor who is going to take it as part of their meaningful task. We make it part of their KPI. But we also have feedback systems that speak to, is it meaningful? What could be challenged? What could be shaped? But put people into projects, but also don't just put people onto projects as observer status. Start small, and I think the beauty of work for me is there's room to make mistakes. I think, I always say to people in teams that I've led, there's room to make mistakes. And sometimes you, as a leader, you allow for the mistake. You see it, it's about to happen, and you let it slide, because it's a moment to learn. And I think that's what we've lost, is we're not allowing people to learn. We're not allowing people to fall. And then they pick themselves up, and then they dust themselves, and then you then guide the process a little bit differently. And some of the mistakes you allow because you've calculated the risk that it's not going to, the organization's not going to shut down as a result of that. But I think in a nutshell is we need to challenge the programs, but we also probably need to focus less on the volume of people we put through, but rather the quality. So I'd rather work with, we have 5 recruits, and we make sure that we do the right thing to develop and skill them up, but also ensure that we place them, because we shouldn't be driving numbers and then we can't place people into employment. because that's just another frustration.
Yes.
And then you walk around with, with graduates. There was somebody I was telling, actually about 2 months ago, an intern who just moved from one graduate program into another. And I remember saying, you need to work on removing this tag of graduate now away. Because once you're a graduate for 5 years,
Sure.
10 years later, you'll still enter a room and you'll only be remembered as the graduate. And then all of a sudden, doesn't matter how brilliant something you've said is, there's this tag. It's like, the graduate said it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also our role, to ensure that we make
Mm-hmm.
sure we remove these tags from people, so that they
Mm-hmm.
don't get stuck and badged as the graduate forever and ever.
Hey, you just hit on you struck a nerve there, because I'm guilty as charged. There's a guy I know from way back, I think more than 10 years or so ago, at one of these tech spaces, and I met him as a graduate back then. And now recently we are connecting via LinkedIn. He's now a cybersecurity expert, and he shares information on cybersecurity and all those things. And I've been guilty of, when I catch him posting, I'm like, oh, it's that graduate guy. You understand? And so the mind is still there. You understand? And unfortunately, he's long overgrown that role or that title, and he's now a subject matter expert in one particular area. Wow. I want to segue into another area of focus, we call it area of interest. But before we do that, I would like maybe just one last question in this space. Now, having worked in the space, where you've seen from different organizations, now you see, how a lot of these multinationals come into the country. They've got certain programs. I think, the graduate program would be one such example. Do you think that they're doing enough in terms of meaningful and something that has impact and that we can measure some years later and say, this company had this program as a result, when the president was talking about the 4IR commission, I don't remember how many years ago, for the first time. Now there are people that are in those spaces and they are part of this committee, and we see the work in the public space that benefits the country. Are they doing enough, Nosipho, in your opinion, or is this, a bit of some shaking of the tree that needs to happen?
So I think, firstly, the multinationals are certainly doing a lot within, I think, the tech space, and at a country level, and perhaps initiatives on diversification. I guess it's the time quantum that you have to look at, and to say, in 10 years, what have you achieved? In 20 years, what have you achieved? Are you at a place where you actually want to be, in saying that? Taking it back 6 months or so ago, I attended a global women in tech conference, and what stood out was the issue of women in tech, as in the technical roles, is not just systemic to us, as it's not an African diaspora story. It's and it cuts across, the racial divide as well. Then, bringing it back home in terms of what are we as multinationals doing. I think there's a host of programs, initiatives that we run with, and maybe sometimes we do need to, every so often, just take stock and say, right, what has been the impact? And you've actually probably now got to talk about that narrative and measure it, and talk the leaps and bounds. But are we necessarily there yet? When I look at the organization I work for, it's quite interesting. You think that there's quite a lot of women until you actually look at the scorecard, and then you realize, wow, there's quite a lot of work to be done. Just because when we enter the room, the meeting rooms, it looks like there's a lot of women. Actually, the numbers don't show that. So is it one that we're going to manage through a scorecard? I don't know whether that's the right answer or not. I think though, you've got to be intentional. You've probably got to be vocal about it. And there are areas where you are going to have to take a hard line around the decision making on either this is how we recruit, this is how we are going to develop. You want to see that. So your question has many areas I could touch on. I mean, there's areas of touching on when you're already a woman in a particular organization, like myself, for instance, or other women within organizations in tech. I guess the starting point is, are there opportunities for me to grow? How do I tap into those opportunities to grow? I think there, what we need to be enabling is making sure that we disseminate information, we bring people into the boardroom. And when I say just into the boardroom, I don't literally mean, we're going to have everybody as a leader by tomorrow, but we need to talk about the journey to get to a point. And each point, what does it mean in terms of the outcomes that you need to deliver and the things that you need to bring to the table. So now I'm talking about a woman already in an organization. I've been privy to, being part of, currently, I'm part of a women's leadership community. And our role is to make sure that the women in our organization are aware of programs of, growing, performance management, speaking up, but also being clear that a woman and a man don't enter a room and don't bring the same level of energy. A man can walk into a room and quite simply say, I need my 50% salary increase, and not be shy about it. And men don't prepare for that conversation, whereas we're like, I think I need 10%, but we're shy about it. And I think those are some of, these are some of the programs that are talking about, we all need to be conscious of the differences, and the fact that we enter rooms with a different kind of energy, but we manage differently because of, women, we say, are softer, have a different way of problem solving compared to men. And I think it's this immersion which must come together to deliver on those outcomes. And then there's you bringing in interns into the field. And I think there, the programs, we've really got to make sure that as a leader, as my role when I look at programs like internship programs, it's important that I understand the expected outcome, and what does the path look like for the person who's coming on. Don't say develop somebody for 9 months and then they can go out and look for a job in some kind of deployment space, because they're not going to get there. They're just going to have more doors shut. So we need to look at things like, is the program going to be a 2-year program? But what does it mean for that person on that program? But also, typically, what's the kind of role they can enter? But we're at the forefront of, we're the multinational, and we have an ecosystem of partners. Those partners is where we must also place this young talent. That we must get the partners to commit to taking people so that they are in employment and they continue to grow. And then I think there's the initiatives that you will drive that talk to community, shall I say, community building, where we now have programs on offer that talk about, and particularly in my space, skills upliftment, skills development, going for that, keeping your brand being top of mind as options for coding, technology and platforms that people will develop their programs on, etc., and build their businesses on. And that we do need to be nurturing from that kind of youth space. And that youth space is, for me, it starts off, at that point where they're young, get them coded, move them into the next stack. And I think there's quite a lot, but sometimes maybe we need to think about just how we aggregate this, because there's a lot of these programs, and I think you can get lost in these programs if you're not quite clear on what they are, how, where they're supposed to take you as well. A long way to answer your question. I think there is a lot that we as the multinationals are doing in the various spaces. But sometimes I think the key thing, and this message is probably now talking to somebody who's entering the workspace and who's already in the workspaces, We're not patient. We're not patient. I want it now.
Yeah.
Not, I don't want it tomorrow. And we're not ready to hear the feedback and continue to nurture and just develop those areas that are being flagged as, look, it's an area of development, focus on this because we want it now. And I guess, a message to a young person, I would say, and a message also to a professional in this, who's finding themselves in that middle management tier is be intentional about seeking feedback. But also put the person who's giving you feedback pressure to say, be specific and be meaningful, and be constructive so I can shape what my learning and my next step will look like.
Sure. Wow, that's powerful. Thanks for that, those insights. I'm just looking at the time, and I'm mindful that you've got load shedding.
I'll switch to. Unfortunately, I've got a backup. I'll switch to that, but we've got 12 minutes.
Yeah. Just quickly before we move to the next topic, you just reminded me of. So we've BrownSense is curating a trade show at the Rand Show in hall number 6 at the Rand Show. One of the merchants is a company called Ambani Africa, Ambani. So they're in the edutech space. And what they do is that they were showing me how it works yesterday. So they've got the app both on iOS and Android. You buy a book, so it's got animals. It's for kids. So there's an elephant or whatever. So it's meant to teach kids the name of the animal in their language. So if it's Xhosa, Chivenda, or whatever, it does that. But also it gives the sound that the animal makes. So you take your phone, on their app, you scan the page where that animal appears, and then it pulls it out and it makes the sound. So if it's an elephant, you get an elephant sound. So when I saw that, and I was like, these are the types of things and companies that should be embraced by the bigger organizations, including government, because this can benefit children at schools, at home, and so forth. Anyway, but come through to the and for those who are watching us to the Red Show, there's a lot more Ambani Africa and more talented merchants there. Tell us about your cycling interests. You're an avid cyclist, and how did that start? How long you've been doing it? Maybe advice to someone who might be an aspiring cyclist to say, you know what, this is the kind of bicycle you must start with. Don't go for cheap. Is it a price thing or those kinds of, because some of them are tired. Yeah, also.
That is such a loaded question. That is so loaded. Yo. So I got into cycling. My hubby, he got into cycling, and 2-hour rides would become 4-hour rides. I'm like, you know what? Rather just join them in it. And honestly, that's how it started. And we got a bike, took it out to Northern Farms. I think in the first 2.5 kilometers, I had a tumble, bent the wheel. It was just a disaster, but we were there with the kids. So I pushed the bike back to home base and I waited for Ken and the kids, because the kids were like, all right, Tina, we're here to cycle. And it's been an interesting journey of you get on, you get off the bike, you get on, you get off, and eventually you say, but I'm not improving. So let me just try to be consistent. But it's my gym, it's my exercise, it's what keeps me healthy. And for me, it's what gets my heart ticking. But in saying that, the cycling has also allowed me to do a whole host of other interesting things, because it's created a network. It's introduced me to some really fabulous personalities, if I may put it in a nutshell. You asked a question of a cheap bike. The matter of budget on a bike for me is relative. It's about how much you want to spend. I always say there's a bike for every budget. Unfortunately, most of us, we enter a shop, and the first thing the salesperson, and look, it's their job. The first thing a salesperson shows you is it 100,000 rand bike? And you're like, yo,
Yeah.
that's the school fee plus, plus, plus. And you're like, I can't do this thing. And I think for me, just in an entry point, it always helps to talk to people, try it out, find places where you can rent one. One, I think, to decide, is this something that you really are cut out for? But also it's the why. It's your why. For others, it's been I get to spend time with my family. It's an activity I can do with my kids. But for others, it's I've been running. I've hurt my knees. The doctor maybe suggested something with less impact on the knees. And it's cycling. But just in a nutshell, there's a bike for me, for everyone.
Sure.
With cycling, I've been able to work with, and I sit as one of the trustees of a foundation called Ride4Hope.
Yeah.
And 2020, in the midst of trying to, plan an upcoming tour, which is from Soweto to Howick over 4 days. And its intention then, the pillar we were targeting was education. So fundraising for education initiatives. We found ourselves in COVID, we couldn't go on a tour, and we went to market with a virtual event. But with the virtual event and with the partnership we have with the Nelson Mandela Foundation, we found ourselves fundraising for food security. So it was no longer about education. And not to say that education wasn't important, it's just at that particular point in time, food security was probably the topical thing. Fast forwarded to last year, similar initiative, which was talking to food security. And then I hope that in 2023, in 2022, our installment of initiative is going to now talk, circling it back to education. Because the first tour I went on, I remember being in one of the township schools, and what an eye-opener. You start realizing that there's a lot we've forgotten about our roots. There's a lot that we need to do. It's easy to say government must do, government mustn't do, and hasn't done. But be part of shaping a solution. Whilst it might not impact millions, even if you impact 20 people, it's 20 people that you're impacting. And that's what I love about the foundation work that I do with the. Oh, there's a dog there. That's what I love. I was wondering what's there. I'm like, but what's going on? And that's what I love about the work that I'm doing there. But cycling has also got me to venture out into, working to make and drive some transformation in the cycling sport from the federation perspective. So I'm involved. I sit as the youth transformation commissioner for Central Gauteng, and having some pretty tough conversations around what does change look like, and there's still a lot of work to be done, a lot, because you cycle and you think, I'm seeing a lot of brown people on bikes, and you're going to see lots of kids on bikes, but then you start getting to, we need to provide the access to the bikes. We need to provide the skills, etc., etc. But it's one pedal at a time, one cyclist at a time, and that's kind of maybe the motto and that's my outlook.
Wow. So tell me, if one wants to play a part in Ride4Hope, is it open to the public in some form in terms of whether donations or?
So the public will engage with Ride4Hope through participation through our activities. And I guess COVID has also has really had us having to think differently about how we pivot, initiatives and activities. But absolutely, from a fundraising perspective, the public is more than welcome to reach out, and we'll find those spaces and those initiatives, and the call to action actually to drive to get the fundraising done to ensure that we are spending the money in the right area and the right activity.
That's beautiful. I'm sharing the website here. I think it's Legacy Ride4Hope.
That's the way. So the ride was called the Legacy Ride4Hope, and it was it was the centenary year. It would have been Madiba's birthday, and the ride was actually an honor, and that's what fostered the partnership with the Nelson Mandela Foundation.
Yes.
And the ride takes you from Madiba's home in Soweto,
Yes.
and it takes you to the capture site in Howick. So, and I guess that was the symbolic, that's where it started. And I don't necessarily see that changing because there's just the symbolism around it. I think it does. Oh, thank you. I see the link there. But what it does is, I guess it grounds us, it keeps us intentional about that, but it doesn't stop us from doing other things that don't just have you ride from Soweto to Howick.
Okay. Wow, that's beautiful. I hope I'll join you next time. Is it like an annual thing? Can I start training now if for next year though?
So I was sitting in a meeting about a week ago and we have dates. So I would say, but in saying that, there are many roles that people can play. You can be part of the support group, you can be a rider, you can be part of the team that actually is part of the operation, getting the fundraising done. There are many different ways. It doesn't just, you're not limited to be involved.
Okay, that's great. Well, that's very exciting. Thank you, Nosipho, for your time. I enjoyed our conversation. I think, like I said, this is the beginning of, well, not only this interview, but many more, but also other things that you and I have been talking about. Getting our hands dirty and just doing the Lord's work.
So now that you're alive and you're recording this, and many have heard you, I'm going to hold you to that. I've raised my hand to do the Lord's work with BrownSense. I'm raising it again. And those on this live stream are my witnesses. So I'm holding
it. Thank you. Enjoy your evening and pass my regards to Ken.
Thanks a lot, Mzu.
Thank you.
Take care. See you at the Rand Show.
At the Rand Show,
I'll see you there.
Well, thanks to everyone who joined us. Bye.
Thanks. Cheers.
Bye-bye.